Here we are again for another water cooler conversation. This week we are we're joined by Louise Fegan, who is a corporate and commercial lawyer, or partner, should I say, for Morrison Solicitors. And I think the topic of conversation today is going to be share sales. So the difference sort of between selling an asset or selling a share, or buying an asset or buying a share.
I suppose you should point out, Paul, that a share sales doesn't mean shares of dental practices per se. It's still a whole practice sale. It's the structure we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, that's pretty much, that's right. So we're looking at the sort of structure of the business, whether you operate as a sole trader or as a company. So I suppose the first question would be a good start is, what is the key difference from a legal perspective when you're looking at a share sale?
Yeah, in a share sale, you are selling everything in that company. So that's the important thing to remember. Everything that company owns or holds will pass. If you compare that to an asset deal, in an asset deal, the buyers are cherry picking what they want, which will typically just be goodwill stock. In a share deal, therefore, you could potentially be taking on liabilities, etc. You're taking on all that trading history the company's had, which is why there's enhanced due diligence on that process. That's the main difference.
Because I suppose from a buyer's perspective, as a kind of a layman, the risk I would see is the fact that it's what you don't know at completion. So it's the unpaid tax bill from 3 years ago, or the fact that they did a bit of the creative means your tax investigation and you've got a 40 grand. Does that make share sales kind of more risky in that perspective?
Yeah, it can really, because they are potentially taking on liabilities. And you're right, if the company has sort of done an remuneration trust or something to get around tax, the buyer, that will be your issue. So there is enhanced due diligence. The accountants particularly do a much more forensic investigation into all the due diligence, so they can be sure what they're taking on. Typically, there'll be more warranties, indemnities. So if things do come out post-completion, there's some redress for the parties.
Right. So you mentioned accountants there. Now, actually, I've got to be honest, my experience is sometimes having an accountant involved in the share sales, which of course is essential. You can't do a share as an accountant, is great because they understand it, but it's not always the case, is it? Because we've had a number of transactions where you get accountants who really don't have the foggiest kind of what a corporate sale actually looks like.
Yeah, that's right. You do need a decent accountant on board, not only to do to look at the financial stuff, but they also need to comment on the net asset position. Often, in all deals, you have to agree a net asset position, asset stroke liabilities, and they have to be comfortable with how that's going to be computed and the policies that go around that. Yeah, you're right. You need to, we do have a lot of issues sometimes, particularly also accountants often have to look at tax covenants. They may not be comfortable with that. Yeah.
As an example, what would you typically define as an issue later on down the line if you weren't aware of one of these issues? What could potentially crop up?
Typically tax. The tax is perhaps more than people thought. I mean, there will be reconciliations in the completion accounts, but the buyer will be less than happy if there's a projected net asset balance sheet projection and it's wildly out afterwards, because if they knew that there'd be perhaps like a minus 200 position, they would want to pay that bit less on completion.
But sometimes they pay more on completion, or do they?
Yeah, they can do. Often sellers perhaps might have a lot of cash on their balance sheets, and tax-wise it doesn't make sense to remove that as a dividend pre-completion. So it can be returned via the completion accounts post-completion as sale proceeds, and that is popular if there is a lot of cash around. Equally, you need the accountants on board to sort of understand how that's going to work.
Yeah, because it's actually, it's a big tax advantage, isn't it, for a vendor to sell their limited company full of cash? Because in essence, as it stands at the moment with the current tax rates, if their purchase price is £7 million, of course they'll pay 10% on anything that tops up to £1 million and 20% thereafter. Whereas if you are drawing that money out of the limited company by means of dividend, they're probably going to be paying, somewhere north of 32.5%, 37.5%, something depending on their tax position. So they're almost going to come almost double their money, aren't they, in a net position proceeds by doing it that way?
Yeah, that's right. And actually, funny enough, I'm seeing more and more of these companies with the cash around, and but generally, most once the accountants get discussing it, we can agree a mechanism that works for everyone. So yeah, we can usually get that right with the right accounting help.
Fine.
Okay. So looking at it then from a staffing point of view, how is it different selling a limited company when the staff are, where the staff could become involved in that?
Yeah, it's a lot easier in terms of the employees, because of course in a share deal, the employer is not changing. It is the company pre-completion, the company post-completion. So the employees, nothing happens at all. Compare that to an asset deal where the employer changes. Obviously, the employees are protected by 2P, but there is a process that you have to go through. You have to inform, consult, can take, I don't know, 4 weeks, etc. And there can be issues. So that's easier. Also with associates as well, if the associates have contracts with the limited company with correct restricted covenants in, again, you don't have to do anything. They will just pass. Compare that to an asset deal. Particularly perhaps if you take an associate-led practice, the buyer will want to ensure those associates have restrictive covenants. They will typically perhaps want a pre-completion condition where those associates sign new contracts with restrictive covenants. Once you get third parties involved, completion conditions, that really slows things up. So it is preferable from that point of view.
So actually, you kind of covered something there, which I hadn't really kind of thought of in a commercial situation. So where you've got a corporate, often corporates will make their completion conditional on the associates signing new associate agreements. But if you've got a limited company, in theory, you don't need new associate agreements. You tend to find the corporates will go, well, we'll take on your associate agreements. Or are they still saying, no, we want our associate agreements signed before completion?
No, generally they will take them on. Rarely, if they think the associates are being paid a bit too much, their license fee, they will push it on to the seller to say, look, sort out those license fees, it's got to go down to 40% or something, and push it on to the sellers to do that. But no, generally, they're good and will honour what they've got. So that certainly makes things easier.
Fine, okay. Fine. Well, we've probably got a couple of minutes left. So I think one of the things that we probably haven't touched on is sort of the CQC aspects and sort of how that sits in. So from what we can gather, selling a limited company for the registration point of view, it's much easier process, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's much easier if it's correctly registered. You can literally get a deal done, I think, if everyone's prepared to do it in 6 to 8 weeks, because it's the CQC process that dictates how long really a deal takes. But that's if the CQC registration is done correctly. I'm seeing more and more share deals where the CQC registration is in the sole petitioner's name, which obviously makes it actually illegal to trade. And it will actually increase the timeline because the buyer will insist that the company is properly registered. So, yeah.
So find out, make the decision early. If you're going to buy as a limited company, you need to know really in that first 4 weeks, don't you pass the post head to terms, or you could delay the whole transaction. So it's really important. Right. So Bill, all right. Well, thank you really a lot for joining us today, Louise. Some key takeaways there, I think. And hope we catch up soon.
Bye.